You make it 3 days before they catch you. 3 days of sleeping in ditches, drinking from streams, moving only at night with your heart hammering so loud you're convinced every dog in the county can hear it. 3 days of almost, and then boots in the mud, torchlight, a hand on your collar. What happens next depends on where you are, what century it is, and who owns you. But one thing is almost always the same. The punishment is designed to be remembered, not just by you, by everyone watching. This is the story of what runaway enslaved people actually faced when they were caught. Not the sanitized version, the real one. The system was built to make escape feel impossible. Before we talk about punishment, understand why it needed to exist at all. Slavery only functions if enslaved people believe resistance is futile. The moment enough people decide the risk of running is worth taking, the whole institution trembles. So every slaveholding society in history developed the same solution: make the consequences of failure so visible, so physical, so public that the lesson writes itself into the body of every person who witnesses it. Ancient Rome had this problem. The antebellum American South had this problem. Colonial Brazil had this problem. The solutions looked different on the surface. Underneath, they were identical. Rome. The F on your forehead. In ancient Rome, a runaway enslaved person, called a fugitivus, was legally the property of their master, and recapturing them was both a legal right and a social obligation. Helping a runaway was itself a crime. When caught, the most common punishment was branding, not hidden branding. The letter F for fugitivus bases burned directly into the forehead, or sometimes the cheeks, permanent, visible at every transaction, every market, every street corner for the rest of their life. Some masters preferred iron collars instead, collars that could not be removed, engraved with inscriptions like, "I have run away, catch me, return me to my master." Several of these collars survive in museums today. You can read them. The names are still there. For repeat runners, Roman law permitted more: forced labor in the mines, gladiatorial combat, crucifixion, which was explicitly reserved for the enslaved and the lowest classes, not citizens. After the Spartacus Rebellion in 71 BCE, 6,000 captured enslaved people were crucified along the Appian Way, one body every 100 feet, stretching from Capua to Rome. A 130-mile message: the American South, the machinery of capture. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the institution had professionalized the business of catching people. Slave patrols, the first organized police forces in American history, existed for exactly this purpose. They operated across the South, stopping any black person who could not produce papers, entering homes without warrants, and delivering runaways back for a fee. Newspapers ran advertisements for runaways with physical descriptions so detailed they read like crime reports: height, weight, scars. The scars themselves were often evidence of previous punishments, noted clinically as identifying marks. When a runaway was returned, the punishment was calibrated. First offense, whipping. Usually public. The number of lashes varied by state and by owner, but the intent was always the same. Pain that teaches. Pain that others witness. More severe cases involved other measures: cropping of the ear, removal of a toe, iron hobbles locked around the ankles, reducing a person's stride to a shuffle. Some enslaved people had iron bits, devices originally used on horses, forced into their mouths to prevent them from speaking. For those who ran multiple times, there were spiked iron collars, devices that made lying down, sleeping, or moving through brush unbearable. You could work in one. You could not rest. Solomon Northup, who documented 12 years of captivity in his memoir, described watching another enslaved man receive over 100 lashes for attempting to escape. The man's back, he wrote, was cut into shreds. What made it worse, Northup noted, was that the man had almost made it. Brazil, the most violent numbers. Colonial Brazil imported more enslaved Africans than any other country in the Western Hemisphere. Roughly 5 million people over 3 centuries. And Brazil had a proportional problem with resistance. The capitães do mato. Bush captains were professional bounty hunters paid per head to retrieve runaways. They operated deep into jungle terrain. They were extremely good at their jobs. Brazilian punishment law was explicit. After the first escape, 100 lashes. After a second escape, branding with the letter F on the shoulder with a hot iron. After a third escape, severing of the Achilles tendon, rendering the person unable to run again. Not a metaphor, a surgical destruction of mobility as legal punishment. Communities of escaped enslaved people, called quilombos, formed throughout the Brazilian interior. The most famous, Palmares, survived for nearly a century with a population estimated at over 20,000 people. When the colonial government finally destroyed it in 1694, its leader Zumbi escaped. They hunted him for another year before catching and executing him. His head was displayed publicly in the city of Recife as proof that he was mortal. That detail, the displayed head, tells you everything about what these systems were actually afraid of. Not one person running. The idea that it was possible. The logic underneath all of it. Here is what every one of these systems understood, even if they never said it plainly. Punishment was never really about the person who ran. It was about the people who stayed. Every public whipping, every iron collar, every body nailed to a post by a road was a message sent to everyone watching. This is what the boundary looks like. This is what crossing it costs. The cruelty wasn't incidental, it was the point. And yet people kept running. In the American South, estimates suggest that tens of thousands of enslaved people attempted escape every decade. Most failed. Some made it. A few, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Henry Box Brown, made it and then spent the rest of their lives pulling others out behind them. The system was built to make escape feel impossible. It never quite succeeded. That gap between what the system intended and what people actually did is where all the history worth knowing lives. They built monuments to control. People kept moving anyway. The collars are in museums now. The advertisements are in archives. The laws are in history books. What is harder to archive is the sheer persistence of people who looked at all of it. The patrols, the branding irons, the 130 miles of road. And decided to run anyway. Not because they didn't understand the risk, because they understood it completely and ran anyway. That is the part the punishment was never able to touch.